Welcome to episode 193 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. This is the objects to observe in the February 2022 night sky. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the night sky, and this podcast is for anyone else who likes going out under the stars. Happy Lunar New Year, Shane.
Oh, thank you. Same to you, sir.
Yeah, I went to, somebody hosted a cultural event in my division on Friday, and I attended that as I just had intended to attend, but I ended up actually helping to broadcast some of the activities that we were showing because there was a technical glitch, and I'm a technical person, so I said, I will help. I was happy to help, but it was really cool to kind of hear how this is celebrated in China. Very cool. All right.
Right on.
Yeah. So first things first, yes, those who are paying very close attention will notice that we are releasing this one before 192 or 192nd episode. And that's just because of our recording cadence schedule and just the way that we do things around here, right?
Yeah. Sometimes this happens.
Sometimes it happens, and that's fine. And there's a couple sort of funny reasons, and one of them is that we release these ones on the 365 days of astronomy, so it will go out on Thursday, and then for our podcast listeners, it's going to go out a few days earlier, so they can kind of take advantage of some of the stuff that is happening in those first couple days of the month. And so we kind of just split the difference. And sometimes, we'll release an episode before the other episode that we recorded earlier, just the way that we do it. So do you want to talk about some of the guests? We have some guests coming up on the show. Speaking of sort of our own, podcast stream, we've got a few guests coming up. Shane, who do you have lined up? You have a couple people lined up, I think.
Yeah, well, just one right now. So next weekend is going to be Mike Rector from the Adirondack Astronomy YouTube channel. He does a lot of sketching and visual astronomy, and excited to have a conversation with Mike.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I was checking his YouTube channel out and seeing what's going on there. I think he's done some stuff with our friend Mark Radici before, and then. Speaking of which, Mark lined us up with Mary Mcintyre, who's also an astronomical sketcher. We're going to have a great conversation with her, I think, at the end of February.
Yeah. She does a lot of imaging too, like really good imaging. So multi-talented.
Yeah. Well, she's an FRAS, which is a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society in the UK. So kind of excited to hear about that as well. And then I was chatting to a long ago speaker of ours when we were first getting in speakers over the internet back years ago. Shane, we had Don McColtz on as, I think he was our first remote speaker, and he's also going to come on the podcast and talk about doing a Messier Marathon in March.
Yeah, so Messier Marathon is when you can observe most, and depending on your latitude, sometimes all of the Messier objects in one night. Yeah. If you're very well organized and have lots of energy.
Yeah. I've tried to do it. On a couple occasions. I got quite a few. I think one year I did it with a observing friend of mine once, years and years ago, and we started observing them separately, and then kind of started observing them together, and sort of the two of us got 103 together. I think something like that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was fun. It was fun. I don't think it's something I would necessarily do every year, but it's just something that Don McColtz helped to kind of start, and so we're going to have him on and talk about that. I have his book on it, and talk a little bit about that too. So moving ahead, my Sky Safari kept shutting down, so might need to do an upgrade there. But I think I got it worked out somehow. I'm on a tablet, which is really a laptop pretending to be a tablet. And so I think my software just got confused over what it was doing. But maybe we'll talk first about some basics about learning the night sky, because we haven't gone over these in a few months. And for those that are just learning the night sky and getting going, what's one way we use to measure stuff as we look at it in space, Shane? How do we know that something is so far from something else? Is there sort of a standard way we can figure out how far things are apart in the sky?
Yeah, so using just like your eyes, visual observing, We refer to the distance of objects in degrees. The moon is 1 degree wide, or the moon is half a degree wide, or the moon is 12 degrees away from Jupiter, or whatever it might be. And one unit of measurement to quickly navigate how many degrees you're looking at is your fist. So, if you hold your fist out at arm's length, the width of your fist from one knuckle to the end of the hand to the other knuckle is 10 degrees. And that gives you a bit of an idea then of how far things are in the sky.
Yeah. And it's important what you said, like when we're visually looking at the sky, we don't actually measure distance in space by the fist. Like we don't talk about how many fists the moon is away from the Earth, because it would be like 8 trillion fists or something like that. We're just talking about, like you said, when we're looking at the moon in the sky, and then we see Jupiter is relatively nearby, maybe it's about 12 degrees away. So you hold up your fist, and then, yeah, sure enough, that it's just a little bit larger than your fist in distance. And I think you've said this before, the way that it works is we're all kind of built to about the same proportions. And so whether it's me and I'm a slightly shorter person and I hold up my fist at arm's length, or whether you're Shane, who's definitely a slightly taller person and he holds up his fist at arm's length, when we're both looking at our respective fists, we're able to kind of match that to about this 10 degrees on the night sky. All right. When somebody says they're going to be, they're interested. So I get this. I'm teaching my astronomy class, and I've had this question recently. I'm thinking about a first telescope. What is your recommendation for a first telescope?
I guess usually it's an 8-inch Dobsonian, like one of the Skywatchers, Orions. Like there's a few manufacturers of them, and they're probably the best value / quality that you can get. And they're a wonderful telescope that can last you a lifetime. So that's one. I know we kind of bounce around. There's a few different beginner telescopes that we recommend. Another one that you've talked about quite a bit in the past is the various flavors of ST80s, small achromatic refractor.
Yeah. And if somebody was looking for, they're still not really sure if astronomy is for them, I think one of the things that we do recommend is starting out with a pair of binoculars, like just a simple pair of binoculars they might already own, and trying those out on the night sky, because that's really going to take you about halfway between what your eye can see to what a telescope can see. And then you're not fighting with mirror reversed images or confusing orientation or small fields of view. And a lot of the other things that I think when people go and they jump, I'm really interested in astronomy, so I'm going to buy a telescope and then learn how to do astronomy. That can sometimes create barriers for people, we've noticed. So we sometimes try to guide them towards getting binoculars, or then, like in my class, often people show up and they've bought like nice little telescopes or whatever, but are having some trouble. And I say, hey, look, just kind of take a step back, get some binoculars, get some basic charts, and make some good recommendations for some charts here. Like what would be a good book with charts in it, Shane?
We've recommended Night Watch quite a bit by Terence Dickinson. It's a great beginner's book to the sky. Another one too that is really good, whether or not you're a beginner or somebody that is maybe a little bit more advanced, is the Sky and Telescope Pocket Sky Atlas. That's another great one too, and it's fairly inexpensive. Yeah,
the Pocket Atlas is great. It's just an atlas. It's not a book. It just has stars covering the night sky. And the great thing about that is that it draws those main star patterns that we kind of all begin to know and learn as we're doing astronomy. Like instead of just having the stars plotted like a lot of the atlases do, it actually draws like that W pattern of Cassiopeia, or, draws in sort of that Scorpius figure of Scorpion, or the teapot of Sagittarius, kind of draws those traditional lines in so that you can more easily use that sort of chart. But if you still are just kind of learning those patterns, I think Night Watch is perhaps a better direction to go in. And then if you're not looking really to spend any money at all, and we're not affiliated with any of these things, but skymaps.com actually has some great monthly charts that they put out for the evening sky as well.
Yeah. It's another good resource that costs you nothing.
Costs you nothing. And something that will cost you almost nothing, but it's probably almost like the most critical thing here, is to make a little red flashlight. How could you make a little red flashlight for using at the telescope or on your charts? And how would you make a little red flashlight, Shane?
There's a few different ways. You can sometimes buy like red duct tape to put over just any old flashlight. You can use paint. There's a number of ways you can turn your light red. The other thing is to try to find, if possible, a flashlight that has variable brightness, because even a red flashlight can be too bright. And the problem with light and nighttime observing is it takes your eyes about 30 minutes to fully adapt to seeing as much as they can see in the nighttime, for your pupils to fully dilate. And if you have too bright of a red light, or if you have white or blue lights around, it impacts your night vision. You won't be able to see as much. So you want to use as little light as what is required. And then any light you use, red, or we're also saying amber, is also, an acceptable light. Yeah.
Yeah. And so why do we use red lights at night? What's the advantage of that over using, say, like the bright white light on your cell phone that we all have now?
Yeah, it just preserves your night vision. Your like a white light will shrink your pupils, and then they're not as sensitive to faint light. Whereas red light, or that red spectrum, just isn't as impactful to your pupil dilation.
Yeah. And so one thing I did try to do last year, for some reason, I can't remember why, but I tried to sort of red light my cell phone light, and that just doesn't work. It's just way too bright. So it didn't work at all. And then, kind of using a red light. And one of the other things, people may be wondering, well, why do you bother using paper charts at all? And I think in general, our recommendation is to use paper charts because of this white light spectrum. And even if you dim your phone or tablet down so far and put it in red mode, it can be very difficult to read when you're actually out under the stars. And typically it's still too bright. And then the other thing, this is the thing that I learned, because I was out and I was doing a project once, and those sort of things maybe didn't matter as much. But the one thing that kind of confused me a fair bit was that when you're using software, sometimes the scaling can be off, or the orientation can be off, and it can be very difficult to kind of match up that scale and the orientation with whatever it is that you're doing. So, for example, if you're looking at an object through the telescope, but you're trying to find it, you have to go back and forth maybe between the telescope and the software, but you need to be able to have that software set at the right kind of perspective that you're going to see through the telescope. But when you're out there in the field, it kind of feels like you have to do it the other way around, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's talk about what you can actually see in the nighttime sky this month. So February 1st, what do we got on February 1st? We have something going on there.
Well, we have a new moon. So this is the time to do your dark sky observing. But we also have a young moon on February 1st, 17 hours old, which is, that's a young moon.
Yeah, I think for us here in Saskatchewan, in the middle of North America, so that middle longitude line, I think we're looking at about 19 hours. Generally where we are here. And that's still an extremely young moon. And in fact, I think probably from here, a 19-hour moon is probably a more feasible thing to achieve. 17 hours that's really, really a thin moon. In fact, I have seen moons that are, well under that 24-hour period, which is always a bit of a challenge. And once you get too far under 20 hours, you get like a broken arc. Like you're not even seeing like an arc of the moon anymore. You're just kind of seeing a line of broken craters along the rim. And I've certainly seen that once, and it's very cool to see. But the chances of getting it when it's that close to the horizon are very low.
Yeah, and this is for people that are really into lunar observing. This is a cool opportunity to see young moons. Some people, this is like kind of the like on their wish list of objects to observe, and that's like, how young of a moon can I actually see? And it's kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, it is. But for those that aren't into that, a night later on February 2nd, the moon is going to be sort of kind of like plus or minus 4 degrees away from the southeastern side of Jupiter. So that's going to be the moon will be below and to the left of Jupiter there. It's going to kind of cut underneath it, I guess. And so you actually be able to see the moon and Jupiter. I think most places on Earth will be able to see this, the moon and Jupiter that close. And that's close enough that through a really wide field telescope, like my little ST80 that I've modified with a 2-inch focuser, my wide low power eyepiece gives me about 6 degrees. So I would be able to get the moon and Jupiter in the same field of view of my telescope.
Yeah. And most binoculars should show that too. Like a lot of binoculars will probably be around that 5-degree field of view. And, with binoculars, you'll see like a lot of detail on the moon right around the terminator, but you should also be able to see the Galilean moons orbiting around Jupiter, depending on their arrangement that night. So that'll be a neat binocular observation.
Yeah, it might be getting a little low to see the moons. If you have really clear skies, you might get some. And then, like you were saying, a binocular is probably the best bet unless people have really small, what we call fast little telescopes with the ability to put wide field eyepieces on. But I know a lot of people do. We had an email recently from a listener who bought a 70 millimeter telescope that has a wide enough field of view to see that. Okay, on the 3rd, sort of continuing on with the path of the moon and Neptune are going to be visible together in the early evening sky, and they will be also in the same binocular field of view.
Yeah, that'll be pretty neat. And the Neptune and Uranus are a little tougher to locate sometimes because they're not nearly as bright as like Jupiter, Saturn, Mars. So when you get Neptune or Uranus close to the moon, it's just a nice anchor point to observe some of those distant planets.
Yeah. Speaking of planets, on February 5th, we have Masalia. Am I saying that right?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So Masalia is it's a minor planet. It's an asteroid, and it's actually the parent body of the Masalia family of asteroids, which are located in our inner solar system. It is pretty big, 145 kilometers in diameter.
Yeah, that's a good size.
Yeah, and it's going to be magnitude 8.5, which for those that may not know the magnitude scale, that's too faint to see with your unaided eye, but that is bright enough to get in a pair of binoculars from a reasonably dark location.
Yeah, and would look great again in a telescope. Although one thing to distinguish with minor planets, they're really going to just appear as a point of light, almost like a star. Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, you can start to bring out the disk of the planet for sure with a telescope, but not really with these asteroids or these minor planets.
Yeah. Okay, moving along, sort of continuing on with our moon theme. And I think, I'm going to say this first about Masalia, is that a lot of the listeners have been tracking down these asteroids and minor planets. I've been really surprised by that. It's been really neat to get people's observations, to get people's images. Some of them have been stacked images. So you can actually see the dots of like the asteroid as it's making its way among the stars, background stars as we see them from Earth, or like a streak or something like that. Like that's been really a cool thing to see, eh?
Yeah. And kind of surprising. Like you and I have had a couple of conversations that we weren't sure what the level of interest would be in minor planets, but there's quite a few people observing them, which is awesome.
Yeah. So we've decided to make sure to continue including these inside the objects to observe in the nighttime sky each month. Again, it was something we didn't think people might be observing as much, but it turns out a lot of people are observing these. And I think one reason why is that, like, for example, at magnitude 8.5, and these are objects that kind of look stellar, so they might be a little bit easier to see than perhaps a deep sky object. And they require typically going out, if you're going to do it visually, and looking over the course of a night or a few nights or a couple nights, a few days apart. Then you can kind of draw the field and see the object having moved sort of among the stars as it orbits in our solar system. And And yeah, that's really cool. And so it's something that you can do even from the city. For example, in a good 4 or 5 inch telescope, you'd easily be able to have that set up. And if you have tracking, you might be able to use your go-to to put it on there. But then again, it's just going to look like a star. So you do have to like sketch the field or take a photo or do something, and then come back sometime later, like a day or a few days later, and repeat that process to confirm that observation. But it's really cool to do. And apparently a lot of people are into doing this, more so than I would have thought.
Yeah. And it just extends, what you can look at out there. It's nice to have kind of a full repertoire of objects to look at, because that means probably on just about any given clear night, you'll have something to look for.
Yeah, and I can't remember when it was exactly, Shane, but we did do a whole episode on that back at the end of November, beginning of, I think it was the end of November, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was right around when Sirius was very prominent. I think we focused a lot more on minor planet observing at that time. So probably some more details if people are interested.
Yeah, people can go hunting for that in our archive. Yeah. February 7th, kind of continuing on with the moon and Uranus are going to be together in Aries. And I think for some reason, I think part of my note got expunged here, but I think you'd be able to see them in the same field of view in a binocular as well. And Uranus is a fair bit brighter than Neptune. Neptune's about 8th magnitude. So that one might be a little challenging to see if you've never seen it before. And you're definitely going to need to maybe do some internet searching to figure that one out. Whereas the moon and Uranus, Uranus is about 5.7 or 5.8 magnitude now. So that's well within the easy range of a binocular from the city. So I should be able to see the moon and then be able to identify Uranus. It may be like the brightest star in that field with the moon on that night.
Yeah. Another good anchor point there to find one of the distant planets.
Yeah, pretty cool to be able to kind of work through those. Like a lot of the time people do want to see them. And I'm going to kind of say this. So, one of the things that's mentioned sometimes in beginner astronomy books is, and I've talked about this in the past, sometimes they can almost downplay or maybe even get pretty far along the bashing thread of sort of putting down some of the entry level telescopes people may have picked up, and you and I tried to steer away from doing that, eh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, as long as you can achieve focus, even cheap telescopes can provide some amazing images.
Yeah, there's an artist over in Quebec who I've had some correspondence with over the past year or so, and she took like what would be considered a really inexpensive department store telescope, and with a little bit of DIY, she turned it into a little work of art. And has made some beautiful like drawings of Mars and the moon and different things of that nature, just by simply adapting it to take slightly better eyepieces, stabilizing the tripod, getting a different mount head for it that she got at a yard sale. So she hasn't spent more than a couple $100 or what a good pair of new binoculars would cost. And she's kind of whipped together a really, really cool little telescope, and lots of people would be able to make those modifications. And then as well, I've had people come through my astronomy class and have done this with the moon as it passes by Uranus and Neptune, or even hunted down some of the asteroids just with like the most inexpensive telescope that they picked up at a large box store. And that really impressed me, because I actually, at that time, this is years ago, I wouldn't have thought that would be an easy thing to do, and it's not. But some people just said, well, look, that's all the money I wanted to spend on this. And but I did want to be able to find all the planets for myself at one point in time. So it's kind of cool that people are able to do that. So these telescopes sometimes can be a bit of a hindrance to observing, but definitely if people have the dedication to go out and do this, it certainly is possible. People can see amazing things with these really inexpensive telescopes.
Yeah. Like they're very capable. Like you said, some small modifications and they can be really solid performers.
Yeah. Moving right on to the moon. Have you ever seen the lunar straight wall? Have you ever observed this?
Oh yeah. Using a telescope, and it is a very, very cool feature to observe, because through the telescope, it's quite large, and it's a very prominent black line, and it looks quite straight. And photographs, you see that it certainly isn't quite as straight as it appears visually. But yeah, I'm trying to think what telescope. Probably my 76 millimeter, I think, is the one that or the observation that I'm thinking of. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't using super high power, but yeah, it's a very cool thing to look at.
Yeah, and you can see it in February, on February 9th. That evening, and it's visible for some time. I forget what it is, but it's like 30 or 40 hours or something. It's quite visible for a couple days. So really, any of the days kind of surrounding February 9th probably give you a fairly good chance of seeing it. But is it a fault line or like a giant escarpment, or do you remember what it is exactly?
Yeah, I don't recall. Yeah, I'm not sure, but it is like, I think, one of those two things, either a fault line or some kind of escarpment. And essentially, again, it's a shadow play with the sun and the angle of the moon, but there's a dark shadow that's cast that forms this straight line.
Yeah, I do kind of see it's referred to as both. Sort of looking up really quick on Wikipedia says it's an escarpment, and then in other places it's listed as a fault. So, but anyway, yeah, it's that's a pretty neat thing to be able to see. So, let's see. Moving ahead and sticking with February 9th, on this day, you will be able to see Ceres. The minor planet Ceres is going to be very, very close to the moon, less than 1 degree away from most locations. And maybe there's an occultation there. I think there is, like the South Pacific or something, but don't know if anybody down there will be listening to our podcast. But on that night, Ceres is, I think, the largest minor planet in our solar system, and you'll be able to see it very, very close to the moon. So you might need to Google that to get a good finder chart, but that would definitely be a pretty neat observation for people to make. Both the moon, the straight wall, and Ceres, sort of all, as sort of three different aspects of this phase of the moon that we're able to see on February 9th.
Do you know what magnitude it will be that night?
I don't, but I think it gets fairly bright. I think it'd probably be around like 8th magnitude or something like that.
Okay, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and as well, the moon will be placed right between the Hyades and the Pleiades that night. So the two open clusters there, are well visible in the evening winter sky. And if somebody's just learning the star patterns, constellations, some of the brighter clusters on February 9th, if you're not interested in sort of looking at those more perhaps challenging things, you can just kind of go out with your eye and sort of eyeball where the moon is. And then above and to the right, you're going to have the Pleiades, and then below and to the left, you're going to have the Hyades.
Yeah. A great little observing session right there, just in that part of the sky.
Yeah, hadn't intended that, but kind of made all those notes. Okay, February 12th, Venus is going to be at its greatest illumination, and that's going to be in the morning sky in the sort of southeast when people get up in the morning. I've been watching just with my eye, and it's exceptionally bright. Mm-hmm. Have you been able to look at it, or is it sort of below the houses behind you?
No, I've seen it quite a bit the last week going into work, and on my drive in, it's well positioned, and like you said, it's quite bright.
Yeah, and then we have on February 13th, Venus and Mars in the same 8-degree binocular field. So so Mars is starting to come around. We have an opposition of Mars coming up in early December. I think it's end of the first, beginning of the second week of December of 2022. But for now, we'll just be able to watch it kind of pairing up with different planets and the moon in the morning sky. And February 13th is when Venus and Mars are going to be together in the same 8-degree binocular field. So they're about 7 degrees apart, I think. So you need a pretty wide field instrument to be able to get them together in.
Yeah, 8 degrees is getting to be pretty wide for for a lot of instruments. But there are some binos, like binoculars, that can achieve that. And I suppose in some cases, there's a few telescopes that can do that too.
And what might work best, and there's lots of people out there now doing photographs and learning the night sky, is this would make a pretty photograph for sure. You could have maybe something in the foreground. I'm not a photographer, but I'm just tossing that out because certainly, most photographic lenses are going to capture a huge swath of the sky, much, much larger than 8 degrees. And, you could have a nice, pretty picture, I think, of Venus and Mars and some of these other planetary pairings that we're talking about.
Yeah. Good suggestion.
Yeah. And so then on the 16th, we're going to have a full moon. And the full moon is actually going to be relatively close to Regulus, which is the brightest star in Leo, the lion. And in the same wide field binocular view, really you're going to need a pretty wide field binocular to be able to see Regulus and the moon. So again, might make a nice photograph for those that are into doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That morning, though, Mercury is going to be at its greatest elongation west. So if you get up really early on February 16th, you're going to see Mercury very, very close. So it's going to be below and left or to the southeast of Venus. So kind of leading up to this, we have, some conversation about Venus and Mars and such. So Venus is exceptionally bright. Venus is much, much brighter than Mercury, though. And Mercury is much, much lower down. So, it's one of those things. Again, you might need to Google and kind of get a feel for what it looks like. Kind of looks like to me, sort of like an orangish, yellowish star, and it's going to be in a bright part of the sky. So just be really close, because when you are looking into the bright part of the sky, just know when your local sunrise is going to be, because you don't ever want to look at the sun either with your eye or through a telescope or anything like that. So we do have to kind of put that disclaimer on. But Mercury is going to be at its farthest point from the sun on February 16th. And so that makes a good opportunity. But if the sky is getting bright, then it's and the stars are fading out too much, then yeah, it's just too bright to see Mercury anyway. So just stop looking. But yeah, while it's still dusky or dawny or whatever, then just go out and try for it. And it might take a couple mornings though. Maybe start on the 14th or 15th or something, and leading up to it. Usually takes me a night or two to get it, or a morning or two.
Yeah, it's always nice to, do practice runs of where it is and just sort of get comfortable or associated with that part of the sky. And then when the 16th comes around, you're probably going to have more success that way.
Yep. Moving on with the moon and Spica in Virgo, they're going to pair up again about an 8-degree binocular pairing for using. So super wide field or a nice photographic view, or just simply for those that are learning the night sky on February 20th, that moon is going to be, just a good distance away from Spica. So basically, the brightest star that's nearest the moon is going to be the star Spica in Virgo. And that's what you can do, is you can actually use the moon to discover the nighttime sky. So many people are going to be familiar with constellations or star patterns like the Big Dipper, or maybe Cassiopeia W, or Orion. And then people are often wondering, how do you learn the rest of the sky? Well, using the moon is one of those techniques. So as it passes by bright stars and planets and such like that, you can actually use it to learn those stars. And then you can know which star is, for example, Spica in this case. And then a few nights later, you go out, the moon's out of the sky, so the sky's darker, and then you can kind of start to trace out those other patterns. And you might not get it like that first month, but after subsequent months and after doing this for years, you'll eventually kind of piece together all of those constellations. And if you're really committed, you can probably really, really learn them all pretty good over the course of a year or two, eh?
For sure. Yeah. It's really just about putting in the time and looking at the sky and matching it up to your charts, and it'll become old hat pretty quick.
Yep. Also in February every year, as it's starting to get dark after we get about a week past full moon. So this would be, so both the 23rd of February, maybe the 22nd of February, in the evening sky, if you're at a very dark location, you may notice like a pillar of light in the west. sort of in the west and kind of pointing up and to the left, coming out of the west, at least for us anyway. And this is called the Zodiacal Light. And what this is it's sort of a recent thing, but originally it was thought to be interplanetary particles. And it is, but they were thought to be sort of more spread out amongst the solar system. So what you're seeing is this plane of particles in the plane of the solar system as illuminated by the sun. Of course, we're looking away from the sun, but those particles are looking towards the sun, and it happens that our angle is just right from the Earth that we can see them right now. But I think in recent years, they've discovered that a lot of those particles are kind of emanating from the planet Mars as Mars is giving off its atmosphere into space.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And if that's a topic that kind of piques your interest, it's well worth doing a little bit of research there, because it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think when Dave Chapman was on a few months ago, I think he was talking about, I think back in the summer, I think he was talking about that.
Yeah. Dave did the research, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, he did an episode with us on the Gegenschein, and then did talk about that in that episode. I think it was like July 28th or something like that. So if people want to dig back through our archive, they can find it there. On February 24th, we're going to have the moon and Antares in the morning sky. So again, you can keep following that moon along every month. And because of, the constellations kind of moving along throughout the course of the year, the moon pairs up with different stars throughout the year. So you're going to, next month, maybe, over the course of the next several months, the moon will be making close, apparent approaches to Antares. But then, as we move out throughout the year, then it will be coming along and getting close to other stars as we see them from the Earth. So you can kind of use that moon as a guide. But anyway, on February 24th, that's when the moon and Antares are going to be close. And then on the mornings, there's a few mornings here at the end of the month where February 27th and 28th, probably even the day leading up to it, Venus, the moon, and Mars are going to be in an alignment in the eastern sky in the morning. So that would be a great photographic opportunity. I know we mentioned, for those who do like to take photos, there's going to be some pairings of the planets and the moon and such earlier in the month. By the end of the month, if you want, and you're a photographer, that would probably be sort of the cherry on the cake once you've kind of gotten a few skills under your belt. Yeah.
Nice alignment to take advantage of.
What do we got for comets this month? Shane, what's our cometary roundup?
So we have 19P Borrelli. We've talked about this in recent podcasts. It's an evening comet that's, I think within the reach of most small telescopes.
Yep.
So it begins the month in Cetus, and it will be around magnitude 9.5. Most amateur telescopes should be able to reach that. The coma is it's pretty good size, 3.5 arc minutes. That seems really large. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. We've had reports. We've had listeners writing us about, I think there's been 3 or 4 different listeners that have sent us observations. And I think the January edition of Sky and Telescope, of which I have many copies of right now, has some good finder charts for that. I think they've got finder charts on their website as well as Skyhound. If people check Skyhound for comets, they will also just Google Skyhound comets and you'll get some good commentary finder charts.
Yeah. It's expected to slowly brighten, and then we'll be moving into Pisces by the end of the month.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. And then we have C 2019 L3 Atlas. So this is the other side of the day. So this will be in the morning, also visible in small telescopes. This one will begin in Gemini at magnitude 9.4, so very similar brightness to Borrelli. But the coma is a little bit larger, so it's 4.5 arc minutes. And the brightness should remain constant for the month. It'll be interesting if anybody observes both of these, because what I'm kind of curious about is they're both similar magnitudes, but different sizes. And when you have the same magnitude spread out over a larger amount of space, it usually doesn't appear then quite as bright to the eye. So, if anybody observes both of these comets, I would love to hear about your comparison about what they look like.
Yeah. That'd be really good. And so anything else to add, Shane? Do you have any double stars or anything this month? Or?
Yeah, I'll throw a couple double stars in. Why not? So the first one I'll talk about is in Taurus. It's known as Phi Taurus, is the system. This double star system is actually an optical system, which means just from our alignment on Earth and what we can see looking in that direction, it looks like these two stars are associated, but they're actually not. It's just the position of everything and our perspective. But what's interesting about this system here, or not really a system, but this optical pair, is they're really prominent colors. One star is gold, kind of yellowish, and the other one is blue. So that's pretty cool. And there's an unrelated bright star there too. That's kind of an orangey red. That's opposite of the B star in this optical alignment. So what's neat is you see some colors, and that is kind of the theme. The second double system that I'll talk about here. Where the heck did I lost it on my list.
That can happen.
There we go. It's in Canis Major, HR 2764. This is known as the Winter Alberio. So double star aficionados or anybody interested in double stars has probably looked at Alberio, which is in the constellation of Cygnus, and it's the star that's at the bottom of the cross in Cygnus. And it's quite popular because it's again a blue and kind of an orangey star, and when you see these two different star color, or these two stars with different colors that close, the color contrast becomes very prominent. And this Winter Alberio pairing here, the main star is orangey, and the companion is kind of a pale, almost sky blue. It's a beautiful pair, and this is the time of the year to have a look. So I can't recommend those two enough. I've looked at them both, and they're quite stunning in a telescope.
Yeah, well, speaking of beer or whatever, Beerio. Anyway, it might be time for lunch soon. Do you have anything else to add to this episode?
That is all, Chris.
All right. Well, thanks, Shane. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And be sure to subscribe in your podcatching software. And we're always very, very excited to get emails and observations to actualastronomy@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.